Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Today's Friday, April 3rd, 2026, coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth blocking or delaying promotions for black people. More than a dozen black and female senior officers across all four branches of the military will talk with retired Lieutenant General Russell Honore about the very issue. The North Carolina Supreme Court throws out a lawsuit over education funding, giving the legislature, the Republican legislature, the power to decide how much money to spend and where to spend it in the state. We'll talk to a North Carolina state rep about that. Also, my conversation with Michigan Congresswoman Haley Stevens, who is running for the United States Senate. We talked about what she would do for black voters in Michigan. Tomorrow, the 58th anniversary of the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. On this night, he gave his mountaintop speech in Mason Temple in Memphis. We're going to share with you an interview I did at TV One with the author of a book who called this his most epic speech ever. Also, a white pastor in Montana calls out Donald Trump. He used to be in the moral majority. We talk about what's happening with white evangelicals in this country. It's a conversation you do not want to miss that I had with Pastor Chuck Baldwin. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah.
Most open discrimination in America. Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, grossly unqualified, is blocking black people and women from being promoted in the military. Now, he's all about white male leadership. These senior officers have been targeted because of their race, gender, or association with the Biden administration's policies or officials. After Pete Hegseth told the Army Chief of Staff, General Randy George, to step down on Thursday, he also removed the Army Chief of Chaplains, William Green, who has served in that post since 2023. He's African American. Generally, a person serves as Army Chief of Chaplains for a 4-year term. No reason was given publicly for Green's dismissal or even the Army Chief of Staff. This is the first time in history that the U.S. Army Chief of Chaplains has been fired by the Secretary of Defense. Keep in mind, Hegseth also fired the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Brown, my alpha brother. Joining us now from Baton Rouge, retired Army Lieutenant General Russell Honore. General Honore, glad to have you here. We can go down the line, the black folks who people work their butts off 20, 30 years to ascend to these positions, and they have been unceremoniously dumped by Pete Hegseth. This is absolutely an attack on black people in the military and white women in the military.
Absolutely. Secretary Hegseth is running a two-front war, one in Iran, and one in the Pentagon. And his culture war is against people of color and women. It's a part of his bro culture that only white men need to be in charge or need to apply. That is what he is, by his action, is what he's demonstrating to me.
Yeah, and what people have to understand, again, General, explain to folk, when we talk about military promotions, this is not just willy-nilly. I mean, that is a real rigorous process. It's supposed to be apolitical, and these are people who have earned it. And by you're denying them retirement benefits, an increase in salary and rank, and they're forcing other people to, frankly, leave the military.
Absolutely. There's a selection board. For one-star general, there's a group of 11 or 12 2- and 3-star generals will select the brigadier generals. And it's a very competitive process. I've sat on that board 2 times myself, and it's a very tough cut from colonel to general. And the best of the best get selected. And you go around the room, and that's where people will talk about what they know about that officer or issues they might have with him. And everybody independently vote. Then they send that to the Secretary of Army and the Chief of Staff of the Army for approval. And normally when that gets to the Secretary of the Army, they will do another legal review to make sure there's no skeletons anywhere in the closet as far as regulatory issues. And then it's forwarded to the Secretary of Defense, who would normally just rubber stamp this and send it on to the White House. Now, there have been issues where that list would get to the Senate, and certain senators might have an issue with an officer on there, or might want the Department of Defense to do something, and they would hold the list up, as Senator Tupperville did some years ago, as you remember. But I've never seen this happen in open combat between the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of the Army, and I'm sure that was a part of the discussion is what I'm hearing on the street with the Chief of Staff of the Army being fired, is that he wanted to keep those officers on that list. And on top of that, there was a decision last week about chaplains. And what I suspect is the Chief of Chaplains said, hey, maybe we need to do this a different way, or should we discuss this? And any dissent in terms of the old line, dissent does not, disagreement does not mean dissent. With Secretary Hegseth, if you push back on him or have a different opinion or said, hey, why don't you look at it this way, that means dissent to him. But he does not understand that, and he'll look for any opportunity he can to fire a general.
NBC News is reporting this here. First of all, Pete Hegseth's book, he complained about wokeism in the military. And this is what they said on Thursday. Hegseth fired the Army Chief of Staff, General Randy George, whose term was expected to be 4 years, ending in September 2027. George, the Army's top officer, was senior military assistant to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin during the Biden administration. George recently asked to meet with Hegseth to discuss Hegseth's blocking of promotions for some Army officers, which seemed to focus on women and black men, but Hegseth refused to meet or discuss his decisions, according to 2 additional U.S. officials. The thing that's crazy here is, and you know the military well, the reality is we have Democratic presidents, Republican presidents. And typically what happens in the Pentagon is that you might have a Democrat president who appoints his own Secretary of Defense, and they don't sit here and go, are you loyal to a Democrat or loyal to a Republican? Because the military is supposed to be apolitical. And so there are individuals who personally may be conservative, who've served in those capacities under Democratic leaders. What Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump is, they want fealty. What they want is they want the leadership of the military to be completely beholden to Donald Trump. So therefore, whatever order they give, they don't want any pushback. They don't want any questioning whatsoever.
No discussion. You know, a point in fact, C.Q. Brown, our illustrious former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who # fired, was appointed Chief of Staff in the Air Force by who? Donald Trump, during his first term. And it was made a big issue. He's appointed the first black Chief of Staff in the Air Force, C.Q. Brown. And here we come 2 years later, and # come in and fires him. Almost in the first 2 weeks, he fired him. So here we go. I think it's a targeted effort by # to only have people in charge that look like him. And if you bring up any disagreement, that means dissent to him. And you have to have complete alignment and agreement. They're looking for loyalists, not necessarily looking for patriots who follow the Constitution. And any discussion. The other thing that there's always competition on the Joint Staff. And each service chief, I served on the Joint Staff as a 2-star general. And the word would come out from the SecDef or chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff with guidance. And there was a lot of discussions and pushback until we got the best decision. But you can't do that in the Pentagon now. You got to do it Pete's way or the highway.
Well, here's a perfect example. You had Admiral Alvin Hosley. Henry, go to my iPad. He headed the U.S. military's Southern Command. And then when they were attacking the boats in the Caribbean Sea, he expressed some concern as to whether or not that was a violation of international law. He was in the job less than a year. And again, these are jobs that, I mean, you work your butt off, and you don't get to those jobs until really towards the end of your career. And once you achieve that, you often retire. So if you're an Army Chief of Staff, all right, the only thing above you is a Joint Chiefs of Staff. And so what Pete Hegseth is doing, he is ridding us of extremely accomplished, talented, smart, able-minded leaders, and frankly, replacing them with sycophants. And that, to me, makes our military weaker, because for the people who keep yelling merit, well, clearly they are ignoring merit with these recommendations.
I couldn't say it better, Roland, than you've just described it. It's all based on not merit, but color.
And gender.
And gender.
Because Hegseth doesn't want women there. And the people that we're losing makes no sense whatsoever. And so, listen, General, I tell people all the time, elections have consequences. And when people don't vote, And when they allow folk like this to get in there, we see what's happening. They are executing Project 2025. You tried to warn people. I tried to warn people. And so I hope folk know, like one of the sisters who was promoted, that sister is a Prairie View A&M graduate. And so you're talking about people who have worked their butts off, who may be seeing the end of their careers because how they are being targeted by this white nationalist administration. And I'll tell you right now, I got an interview later with a white pastor out of Montana who flat out said he called Pete Hegseth a white nationalist. Here we go to my iPad. This is the sister right here. Prairie View saluted her 4 years ago when she became the first African-American female active duty engineer to be promoted to the rank of general officer. Her name is Antoinette Gant. And this is the sister that Pete Hegseth is blocking for further advancement. And that's a damn shame, General.
Yeah, as I recall, General Gant is the commander of the District of Washington and is doing a fantastic job. And there was some loose reporting coming out that out of Hegseth's office that they shouldn't have recommended her for that job because the president wouldn't want to stand next to a black female. So let's go back to voting. This ought need to motivate everybody to make sure your registration's straight, that you reserve the day to go vote as a special day in your life, and you take somebody with you, take 2 or 3 with you. But if you don't vote, you don't count. And we need to motivate our young folk to get off the AZZ and go vote. We cannot take this attitude that I didn't get what I wanted the last time and it don't make a difference. Every vote make a difference. Otherwise, we're going to see more of this. Matter of fact, it's going to be encouraged because silence means consent, Laura.
Absolutely. General Honore, I appreciate it, my brother. Thanks a lot.
God bless America.
Yes, sir. And happy Resurrection Weekend. Thanks a lot. All right, folks, going to a break. When we come back, we're going to talk education funding in North Carolina. Republicans on the Supreme Court shut down a 30-year lawsuit. We'll tell you about it right here. Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
Protect your mind. I love you, son. And your mother. More than anything. And I'm gonna keep doing the best I can to prove it. If you're seeing it in your mind, you can create it. Protect your mind, son. It's your greatest asset. Protect your mind.
Why does it feel like we're going backward? Voting rights under attack, schools stripped of funding, black history erased. This is the Trump MAGA agenda. They want to take us back. They are redrawing congressional lines in states across the country, deciding who gets power and who gets silenced. We see what this is, a power grab. Virginians won't be fooled. Show up, vote, take back our power. It's a temporary measure that gives the people, not politicians, the final say. Vote yes by April 21st.
With medicine and science under attack, I want to keep you and your family informed and healthy. I'm Dr. Ebony Hilton, and I knew at the age of 8 that I wanted to be a doctor. So I studied hard and became the first African-American female anesthesiologist hired at the Medical University of South Carolina since its opening in 1824. And I always say I was made into a doctor, but I was born to be a mom. And as a new mom, wife, sister, daughter, and friend, I understand how frightening a medical crisis can be. I care for individuals on some of the worst days of their lives, and it's my mission to provide you with a safe space to gain clarity on issues affecting your mind, body, and soul. I recognize that there are health disparities, particularly as it pertains to race, and I want to help bridge the gap between you and your healthcare providers. Join me every Thursday for Second Opinion on the Black Star Network, where each week I'll invite experts from various medical fields to share the latest health news. We'll discuss topics such as the vaccine debate, mental and sexual health, medical bias, infertility, menopause, andropause, nutrition, and aging. Together with my medical colleagues, we aim to provide you with a second opinion. Don't miss it, Thursdays only on the Black Star Network.
Hey, I'm TD Jakes, and you are watching the Black Star Network.
On Thursday, the North Carolina Supreme Court, Republican-led Supreme Court, shut down a decades-long legal battle over education funding. In a 4-3 ruling, the court dismissed the Leandro case, ending a 1994 lawsuit over whether the state is properly funding public schools. The decision overturns a 2022 ruling that allowed a judge to order hundreds of millions of dollars in spending to address education inequities. The new ruling keeps control of school funding with North Carolina lawmakers, not the courts, meaning Republican legislators will decide how education dollars are being spent. Again, this means that Republican lawmakers are no longer required to follow a court-ordered funding plan. North Carolina State Representative Amber Baker joins us right now. Glad to have you here. This was a battle. We're talking $700 million. We've seen in other states where the courts weighed in when it came to funding. I keep saying this all the time, Representative Baker. Elections have consequences. Republicans have a 5-2 majority on the Supreme Court there. And this is what happens when you have hard right justices deciding these cases.
Yeah, good evening, Roland, and to all your guests. It was a gut punch because not only did they roll back over 30 years of a fight, but they have also included in their legislation or their ruling is that this case cannot be re-entered. So $1.3 billion is what it would have taken for them to put in the three major parts of this legislation, which was highly qualified teachers, highly qualified principals, and fully funding universal pre-K in schools where you had low performing scores.
This is, it's a huge deal. I saw that Judge Anita Earls had posted a video explaining her dissent in this particular case. This is, and look, she's on the ballot this year. And I keep telling people, those three Republican seats are on the ballot in 2028. When Sherry Beasley was the Supreme Court justice, lost by 401 votes. Had she won, Democrats would have had a 6-1 majority on that court. And we saw when the Republicans took control, they literally reversed decisions the Democratic-led court had made just a few months earlier. And so we can't ignore ideology when we talk about how these decisions are being made by these state Supreme Courts.
It's absolutely correct. And the decision was a 4-3 decision, with one of the Republican judges actually siding with the Democrats in terms of not overturning this decision. And so it is absolutely true that in 2022, when we got the initial ruling that the legislature was to release the $1.3 billion, was earlier in the year. And then in November of that same year is when Sherry Beasley lost her race. And it went downhill from there.
So what's next?
So we are waiting. We are sure that they are going to have some people to file some additional legislation. I'm sorry, not legislation, but to take the courts, not to the lower courts, but possibly try to get it to go to the higher courts, to the U.S. Supreme Court, because even though we as legislators have the primary responsibility of fully funding free and public education, we have failed that on so many levels. As you've had me on here so many times before, we are also dealing with the expansion of voucher programs that now have been extended to parents who send their children to private schools. And so we're looking at like an $8,000 tax credit for those parents who can afford that, which means that it is continuing to hurt our poor and lower wealth counties who do not have a stronger tax base to augment what they get from the state.
Well, it is a hard decision, but it's one that we have to confront and deal with. And again, I just keep telling people, you have to look at the math. You have to look at the fact that what Republicans have done in North Carolina, they have politically gerrymandered and racially gerrymandered the state. That's why they have control of so many legislative seats in the House and the Senate. And the reality is, if this court flips, just like we saw in Wisconsin, if this court flips to where they no longer control it, then what then happens is people can then sue, and that court can rule against political gerrymandering that can realign the state. And then you will see a much more fair state in North Carolina when it comes to these rulings. And so people have to understand there's a direct correlation between this decision, the people making this decision, and then how people are voting. And too many of our people who sit out elections, we are allowing other people to decide our fate.
Yeah, and I don't know if you discussed this on your show, but you know, the Senate Pro Tem Phil Berger lost his primary race by 23 votes. His son is one of the Supreme Court justices that ruled on this case. We had several Republicans that also had Republican challengers that lost their seat as well. And so tide is a shifting, but it is important, ever so important now, that we continue to push and get out the votes, because I believe that the Republicans have just pushed a little bit too far, and people are paying attention, not only to what the Republicans are doing, but how Democrats are voting as well. And so it's really, really important that we stay engaged, that we continue to work to push out the vote. And, you know, we've got to get back to ground roots campaigning. We can't just keep dialing it in. We can't just rely on social media, text messaging, phone calls. Like, we've got to get out into community and help people to understand what the correlations are.
Absolutely. All right. We certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
All right, folks, got to go to a break. When we come back, today marks the day Dr. King gave his last sermon at Mason Temple in Memphis. We'll share with you an interview that I did with the book author who said that his speech that he gave on this date 58 years ago was his most epic biblical speech. Also, we'll share with you an interview I did with a congresswoman from Michigan who wants to become the next United States Senator in Michigan, and a great conversation with a white pastor from Montana who had tough words for Donald Trump, who also says that we must confront white nationalism in this country. All of that right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Support the work that we do. Join our Bring the Funk fan club. If you want to contribute, your dollars make it possible for us to do the work that we do here. Cash App, use a striped QR code. You see it right here. That's for credit cards as well. Checks and money order. Make it payable to Roland Martin Unfiltered. P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 2037-0196. PayPal's R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle, Roland at RolandSmartin.com, Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Back in a moment.
MAGA Republicans ended diversity programs, cut funding for black students, and fired federal employees. And they won't stop there. Now, they've redrawn congressional maps so that they can rig the November elections. But we have the power to stop them. By voting yes for fair elections, we have the final say on who represents us in Congress. This is a temporary measure to restore fairness. They are not backing down, and neither can we. Make a plan to vote by April 21st and vote yes for fair elections.
A decade of love, joy, and power. Black Voters Matter is 10 years old, and we are just getting started. This is love with a purpose. This is Black joy in motion. This is unstoppable power. Across campuses, neighborhoods, and back roads. Let's go! We show up not just to vote, but to be seen, to be heard, to belong. We ride together, we organize together. We remind each other that our voices matter, because they always have. Black Voters Matter is about more than ballots. It's about housing and healthcare, clean water and living wages, education, reproductive freedom, and dignity. It's about turning pain into action, turning belief into movement, turning community into power. We don't wait to be invited. We bring the energy. We bring the love. We bring the people. Because when Black communities come together, we don't just survive, we thrive. This is how change happens. This is how history moves. We organize, we build, we win.
I'm Mark Morial, President and CEO of the National Urban League, and I'm watching the Black Star Network.
If Democrats want to win control of the Senate, they must hold on to one of their seats in Michigan. Gary Peters is retiring as the United States Senator. There are several Democrats who are vying for that position, and one of them is Congresswoman Haley Stevens. I recently had a conversation with her talking about what her aims will be if she's able to win that primary and become the next United States Senator from Michigan. Here's our conversation. All right, Representative Stevens, let's get right into it. Obviously, there's a lot at stake with this election. We're talking about critical seat in Michigan. Senator Gary Peters holds that seat right now. And this will also depend upon what happens in this state, and others will determine whether Democrats control the Senate. And so when you look at the most critical issues, what are the two or three that stand out for you as you travel around the state talking to voters?
Yeah, and look, I'm a daughter of Michiganders. My dad was born in Detroit. He taught first grade in the city for the last 15 years of his career. It's about hardworking Michiganders who just want to be able to get ahead. The number one thing I hear from Michiganders is about rising costs. If it's their health care, their grocery bill, the housing, what's going on at the gas pump right now. And I'm not just talking about these things. I've got a track record of doing and delivering for Michigan. You mentioned our outgoing Senator, Gary Peters. He and I have been recognized as some of the most effective Democrats for Michigan in our respective chambers. Some of the most effective Democrats writ large. And so I'm saying no tariffs on Groceries Act. I'm saying, lessen our dependence on China to produce and create and make here in Michigan. The other major topic, there's job insecurity right now. There is job insecurity that has been brought on by erratic tariffs, by disinvestment in communities of color, particularly where this administration has tried to cut the Minority Business Development Administration from existence. We have no more Department of Education. We don't have civil rights enforcement. And these are all things that impact Michiganders, impact livelihoods and employment. It's not acceptable. The Republican who's running, he wants to just continue on, rubber stamp Trump. He wants, he's had all this self-enrichment in the, years since he's been in public service. And what's that going to get us? No open Gordie Howe Bridge, a big slap in the face to, downriver. My friend, Mayor of Ecorse, Lamar Tidwell, we're just sitting there shaking our heads on this. So it's been one chaotic event after another, and a president who's not looking out for Michiganders. I will.
Obviously, when you start breaking down, obviously, affordability is a critical issue, but also what Donald Trump has done in attacking electric vehicles, that has had a devastating impact financially on the three automakers, the write-downs of General Motors as well, and this notion that somehow you can't do two things at one time. I mean, even to the point of destroying EV power stations that have already been constructed in federal buildings that were already paid for by taxpayers. I don't understand how that actually hurts people. I mean, I don't understand how that helps people.
You're right. Right. No, this is why some of our counties in Michigan have some of the fastest growing unemployment in the country. You know, we had Detroit 2-3 years ago with the fastest job creation in 50 years. We are a manufacturing destination. Look, I worked in the administration of President Barack Obama. I was chief of staff on an initiative called the U.S. Auto Rescue, which was responsible for making sure our auto industry didn't totally collapse. We saved 200,000 Michigan jobs. It was, you know, our auto workers, the spirit of Detroit, the resilience that comes through here. I'm going to tell you right now, Roland, what I'm hearing from folks that's so eerily similar to that Great Recession period is, oh, we made it through that. You know, we made it through the bailout period. So I guess we can make it through this. And the tax bill that Trump and his allies in the House and the Senate pass has had dramatic impacts on clean energy, new innovations. I had 450 clean energy jobs in my district alone, just, you know, go by the wayside in December, right before the holidays. We had $50 million getting pulled out of Detroit. We had a whole industry just really on standstill. And look, I'm not in the business to tell people you got to buy this car or that car. That's for the car salesman. But what I am in the business of doing is protecting, expanding, growing Michigan jobs, and making sure that we can beat China. You know, we do that here. And I'm going to tell you, there's so many incredible and remarkable things that I've seen, you know, as a manufacturing evangelist in my time in the United States Congress, and is one of the reasons why I'm running for United States Senate, because my state needs a pit bull in there who's going to advocate, you know, for our people and our biggest source of employment and jobs, and that's the autos and manufacturing.
Well, it was interesting to me. I think it was in Mississippi that there was this one town. There was, you know, 1,000 jobs making batteries, and by pulling that money, it all went away. And we're seeing sort of this spiteful decision making that's coming out of the White House, and House Republicans and Senate Republicans capitulate and literally say nothing when these arbitrary decisions are being made.
Yeah, and these have been, you know, billion-dollar investments. You know, you look at a company called Magna. You know, I visited them through my Manufacturing Monday program. You know, it's a Canadian-based company. They've got huge enterprises here in Michigan. You know, you're driving outside of Detroit, you see their facility. I had one actually across the road from me where I used to live in Oakland County. And I'm going to tell you, the president starts a trade war with Canada, in addition to the disinvestment and the push against, you know, some of these new innovations, as you're mentioning. I remember when that Mississippi announcement got made too. And, you know, they're going against their own interests. So Michigan companies right now are saying, wait a minute, we put in tons of money to have these jobs and to have this section of our economy, and the rug's been pulled out from underneath us. It's a big problem.
But when it comes to black voters in the state, we have seen last civil elections a decrease in black voter turnout. There are black voters, and especially black men, who say that, listen, they're not getting the response they need from Democrats. And so what specific agenda are you saying to black folks in Michigan that if they put you in the United States Senate, you'll be fighting on their behalf?
Yeah, and this is not something new for me. You know, I have long been a part of solutions, activities, investments into Black communities. I've got legislation I'm taking right to the United States Senate. It's one of the reasons I'm running to invest in Black-owned businesses. There's been so many rounds of seeing what COVID did to Black entrepreneurship, what is going on with the canceling of the Minority Business Development Administration. And we don't need another loan, right? Folks need access to capital. And so I've got a bill called the IDEA Act, to do the investment into Black entrepreneurship and Black-owned businesses. I want to see that get done. We know that Black unemployment is rising. We know that these cuts that this administration have made have hit our Black community hardest. And I say this, which is I campaign like I govern, and I govern like I campaign. I show up in communities. I've been doing that. I'm sitting in the House for 4 terms, fighting to make sure that our fair share of federal funds go into sometimes overlooked areas, overlooked communities, fighting for equity. And that's a cornerstone of my campaign. And I've codified it all in what I'm calling the My Hope agenda that I built alongside leadership, in our faith communities, leadership at the local level, couched in how, we've had some success, how I've gotten some things done for Black communities and individuals, but also what we need to go do in the United States Senate. So it's an intentional and continual part of my work.
You talk about the issue of Black entrepreneurship, and what we are seeing is a direct attack on that. I've been saying that what we're seeing for this administration is what I call a defund Black America initiative, targeting. We're seeing. I had a story just the other day of Black contractors, the opportunities they've lost, hundreds of millions of dollars with the stoppage of DOGE contracts, grants along those lines. So what would you do in that regard if you are a United States Senator?
Yeah, you've hit it right on the head that we are seeing a defund movement going on from this administration, and a canceling of programs that, impact people's lives and also have contributed to rising unemployment. And here's the deal, we hold the purse in the Congress, except for it feels as though the Congress has forgotten that. And so, I want to make sure when it comes down to appropriation time, I just today introduced legislation about the Social Security Administration, and I called it the Customer Service Act because of the 7,000 jobs that were cut and pushed out of Social Security, and it's hurting people who try and get access to their benefits. And then the other deal is that, when I worked in the administration of President Barack Obama, we saw firsthand, I worked, alongside the Minority Business Development Administration. I saw it firsthand. I saw what it meant to have minority contract requirements in place, working with minority suppliers, through our automotive sector, family-owned businesses. And again, that's building strong communities. That's making sure that neighborhoods stay strong, that our public schools can stay strong. We know what disinvestment looks like, and that becomes a race to the bottom very quickly. And so we've got to strengthen our laws. We've got to push back when this president just thinks he can do whatever he wants because he sits in an Oval Office with a pen. A big part of this job is oversight, and we've got to call that out. I believe that my investing in Black-owned businesses legislation could become bipartisan. That is something that, could galvanize folks. Why? Because yes, it's using federal dollars to spur more growth. We got to have equitable growth. We can't just have, the K economy where some are doing really well and others are not. It just doesn't work. And so, I'm so proud to have some great leadership and voices standing alongside me in my run for United States Senate. Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence has endorsed my campaign alongside a dozen members of the Congressional Black Caucus. I've got Michigan's first Black Speaker of the State House, the great Joe Tate. Man's got a remarkable career. We're on the horn all the time, ideating and trading notes like this. And look, it's not to make false promises, but it's about to be dogged. Roland, we can't be sweeping these things under the rug when they're cutting off minority businesses from federal contracts. It's not right.
One of the things that we also are seeing is this, the rising cost of education. There are 103 HBCUs. I've been to 59 of them in the country. And what is always shocking is when you see how dramatically states are no longer funding college tuition. And then you start seeing these cuts on the federal level. Pell Grants, financial aid, that is crucially important. What are you looking at in those areas? Because we talk about HBCUs, like a lot of colleges, they really depend upon that financial aid. And, you talk about 80-90% of those students are getting those Pell Grants, things along those lines. And so what is your plan when it comes to Congress, when it comes to the federal government, doing better at financing college education? Because we can't talk about, beating China, and when it comes to STEM, when it comes to technology in the future, you don't have the folks who are in a position to do that.
No, and your work in this space is so important. And I'll tell you, one of my favorite things, that we have here in Michigan is HBCU, college tour send-off. And I've gone to that, at Groves High School, we were sending off, busloads of students and their parents to go and tour HBCUs. As someone who sat on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, by the way, we just had that big Artemis launch with some, incredible trailblazers heading to the moon. That's really exciting. And the first Black man to go up there. And that's really great. But we've got, some work around the HBCUs that Eddie Bernice Johnson, and I was her vice chair, she and I led on this. And it was about getting STEM grants through the National Science Foundation to the HBCUs. Because you hit it right on the head. We heard from researchers all over, the academics, the researchers, the businesses, all this. They said, you're leaving American talent behind. And this was before, they decided to attack equity on the Republican side, which is so backwards, because we saw that if we're leaving American talent behind, we're falling behind. And so with the CHIPS and Science Act, which I helped to pass, we put all those priorities in. When you're talking about Pell Grants, they need to be expanded. We need a Department of Education. We need an Office of Civil Rights. We need an Office of Literacy. I'm looking at what my Detroit public school students need. They need the same investment. And, Highland Park, here in Michigan, a great community within the city of Detroit, great city, they need their public school reopened. And so how do we do that if we don't have a Department of Education? How do we do that if we can't achieve the goal of fully funding special education in the United States of America? And so this is why I've long pushed to expand Pell Grants. And it's also why, frankly, one of the best bills I ever got to introduce, which was a Student Aid Act, and it came from my friends, the Mason family in Hazel Park. I knocked on their door. They had me, basically over to their house. I was just, saying hi to folks in the neighborhood, reminding them of the election coming up in a couple months. And we started talking, and the parents in that conversation opened my eyes to a huge loophole we have with financial aid, which was that mom and dad, both UAW workers, by the way, working in a different plant, were so proud, sending their two students off to Michigan State University, go green, and they'll say go white, because green and white, that's, you know, the Michigan State colors right behind me here, although I love all our Michigan schools. But what Dad showcased to me is he said, Haley, we don't qualify for financial aid. The family didn't qualify for financial aid, even though Dad was still sitting on student loan debt himself. Why? That's a loophole. So I wrote legislation to close that. I can't tell you how many families, you know, they want to have their kids. Not everyone, and that's great. You know, there's great apprenticeship programs, but his kids were going into math and psychology, and yet they were going to incur the same debt that he did. So I wrote a bill to close that.
Last question. There's somebody sitting out there watching and listening who's in Michigan, who says, I don't trust the process. It doesn't work for me. It only works for folks of means, who are rich, who have access. What do you say to that person as to why they need to be registered and why they need to vote in the Michigan primary, but also in the general in November? Well,
one, your vote matters, and it deeply matters. But two, it matters because it's your taxpayer money. And where you're voting is determining the benefits, it's determining the effective utilization of resources, and we need that system to work better for working people. I'm going to tell you right now, folks feel tuned out and turned off because there's promise after promise made, and yet costs just go up, and billionaires just become double billionaires and more billionaires. I believe, as a tried and true public servant who's running for United States Senate with a whole lot of public service in my heart, that people should not be getting rich while in public office. And this is why I wrote legislation called No Getting Rich in Congress. All right. I don't own stock. I'm not a millionaire, and I'm not trying to become one. I'm trying to make your tax dollars work for you and your family so the working person can get ahead. And so that's why your vote matters.
All right. Representative Haley Stevens, we appreciate you joining us on the show. Good luck in your race for the United States Senate.
Thank you.
Folks, up next, I will explain to you why Virginians, especially black people, should vote yes on April 21st in their redistricting special election as payback for Republicans screwing over black elected officials. You need to watch what I have to say. Plus, we'll share my interview with a author who said that Dr. King's speech on this day in 1968 was his most epic speech. Plus, a white pastor in Montana who has tough words for Donald Trump says Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is an absolute white nationalist. Ooh, it's an interview, y'all, you do not want to miss. All of that in the second hour of Roland Martin Unfiltered, right here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Why does it feel like we're going backward? Voting rights under attack, schools stripped of funding, black history erased. This is the Trump MAGA agenda. They want to take us back. They are redrawing congressional lines in states across the country, deciding who gets power and who gets silenced. We see what this is, a power grab. Virginians won't be fooled. Show up, vote, take back our power. It's a temporary measure that gives the people, not politicians, the final say. Vote yes by April 21st.
Protect your mind. I love you, son. And your mother. More than anything. And I'm gonna keep doing the best I can to prove it.
If you've seen it in your mind, you can create it. Protect your mind, son. It's your greatest asset.
Protect your mind.
Virginia, we are counting on you. Republicans want to steal enough seats in Congress to rig the next election and wield unchecked power for 2 more years. But you can stop them by voting yes by April 21st. Help put our elections back on a level playing field and let voters decide, not politicians. This is the responsible thing to do. Help us chart a better path forward, Virginia. Vote yes by April 21st.
Hey, I'm Malcolm Lee, and you're watching the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, so let's talk about gerrymandering and redistricting, okay? And actually, let me do this here. I need to grab these things off my desk. Y'all stay right there. So understand this here, all right? When we talk about gerrymandering and redistricting, we're talking about a couple different things, okay? So every 10 years, the census is taken, okay? And so after the census is taken, that's when they have apportionment or reapportionment, where they determine based upon the population how many congressional districts go in each state in the country, okay? So here's what then happens. So based on population, if a state loses population, another state gains population, that state will see an increase in their congressional districts, all right? So for the longest, you would see that happen every 10 years. So the census is done, and then right after the census is done, the states then go through reapportionment, which is also redistricting. Now, we talk about gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is how the states draw the different lines. Political gerrymandering is when a party or whoever is in control draws the lines to benefit them. So they get more congressional seats than the party, or they get more state seats, state rep, state senate, than the party. Now, remember, United States Senate is 2 per state. It doesn't even matter, all right? Then you have something called racial gerrymandering, when you have gerrymandering that's also based upon the issue of race. The Supreme Court ruled that they had no authority to rule in political gerrymandering cases. They said that's left up to the states. And so therefore, the state Supreme Courts can rule in those places. The Supreme Court barely still has authority when it comes to racial gerrymandering. And so what we've seen is that both parties, Democrats and Republicans, have used political gerrymandering to their benefit. Now, what did we see happen in Texas last year? But it wasn't just last year. Last year, Donald Trump calls up Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and they first sent a letter from the DOJ saying, hey, the seats that y'all did, the seats in Texas, the map that you drew in Texas after 2020, we think you use race, so therefore your map is illegal. Now, Texas got sued by various groups saying they discriminated against blacks and Latinos. They were actually in court defending those maps, saying they didn't use race in consideration. So here was Texas in court saying we didn't use race. Trump folks saying y'all did use race. So Texas Governor Greg Abbott calls a special session to redraw lines because Trump said, I want 5 seats. I want 5 seats. So they redrew the lines. So we have 4 African Americans in Texas who were elected. 4. You had Mark Vesey, Jasmine Crockett in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. You had Al Green, and you had Sheila Jackson Lee, who passed away, was replaced by former Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner, who passed away, so therefore was an open seat. Christian Menifee eventually wins that seat. So you had 2 in Dallas-Fort Worth, 2 in Houston. They redrew the maps, only leaving 2 African Americans. So you see a net loss of 2 African Americans in Texas. That then sets off a gerrymandering battle. You then had, of course, California Governor Gavin Newsom said, all right, Texas, y'all play that game. We're going to redraw our maps. And they did to pick up 5 Dem seats. Well, Republicans across the country said, we're going to go after this. So they said, redraw the maps in Indiana. Indiana Senate voted it down. It didn't happen. They said, let's redraw the maps in Kansas. Kansas didn't do it. Missouri, the Republicans did. They wiped out the seat of Congressman Emanuel Cleaver in the Kansas City area. Republicans in North Carolina wiped out the seat of Congressman Don Davis. Now, let me explain to you North Carolina, okay? North Carolina was a 10-4 Republican majority in North Carolina. Then when the Democrats took control of the state Supreme Court in North Carolina, it was then 7-7. They said no political gerrymandering. Well, when the Republicans took back control of the Supreme Court, they said allowed, went back up to 10-4. Now, by trying to cancel Don Davis's seat, all of a sudden, Republicans say they wanted an 11-3 majority. Now, I want you to hear what I'm just saying. Because Republicans did that in North Carolina, that pretty much gave them the majority in the United States House. They barely got a majority, but they had a +4 pickup in North Carolina. Now, also, you got to remember, this here happened in Florida. So in Florida, Florida Governor, here we go to my iPad. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, what he did was he targeted a black district that was in North Florida. Ron DeSantis, on his own, targeted the district, okay, alleging that the creation of that district conflicted with the 14th Amendment. Now, Republicans in the legislature didn't want to do this, but he drove the map through. What ended up happening? The Florida Supreme Court then affirmed Ron DeSantis' decision in Florida. So let's do the math. So we lost a black seat in Florida. That's 1. We lost 2 black seats in Texas. That's 3. We're going to lose Cleaver's seat in Missouri, 4. And then may lose Don Davis's seat in North Carolina. That's 5. That's 5 black seats. Now, you may now begin to ask, well, hold up. I need to understand, where did all this stuff happen? Well, all of this stuff really happened in 2003. In 2003, Tom DeLay, who was in the House, what he did was he said, yo, let's have us an advantage. So in Tom DeLay, so this would happen here. This was a newspaper article in the Austin American-Statesman, and it said, AWOL Democrats found. So what happened was Democrats fled Texas and went to Oklahoma to keep them from having a quorum to pass those maps. And so, as you see in this story here in the Texas Tribune, you see it right here. 2003, Tom DeLay drove this entire deal. So when it came to mid-decade redistricting, all right, what happened was Tom DeLay said, why do we need to wait? We got the majority in the Texas legislature. Let's run the table. And that's when this whole mid-decade redistricting thing started taking form. So what you're dealing with here are Republicans who started the whole deal with mid-decade redistricting, and they were the ones who began this process. So where are we at right now? So Democrats were sitting here, oh, play fair, play fair. Democrats didn't do mid-decade redistricting. Republicans did. And so what's happening right now in Virginia is they said, okay, State Senator Louise Lucas said, yo, 10-1. We're going to push a 10-1 map. We're going to have 10 Democrats or create 10 seats that will favor the Democrats versus run Republican. Oh, Republicans are upset, mad. They're angry. This is wrong. It's unfair. But the same people, the same Republicans in Virginia who are complaining were quiet about Texas in 2003. They were quiet about Texas last year. They were quiet. Now, they were angry when Gavin Newsom responded. Oh, this ain't right. Californians like Kevin Kiley, the congressman, was complaining, but he was quiet when Texas made their move. They said, not my backyard. The Republicans in Virginia were quiet when Republicans in North Carolina made their move. They were quiet when Republicans in Missouri made their move. But now they're complaining. Now, the reason I want you to understand why black people need to understand why we should be voting yes in Virginia is because it comes down to political power. And what I need our people to understand is that when you talk about political power, you have to recognize where power lies. All of this is a power play. Everything that I am describing for you is a power play. So I told y'all, remember, we lost one black seat in Florida. We're going to lose 2 black seats in Texas. We're going to lose a black seat in Missouri. We're going to lose a black seat in North Carolina. That's 5 seats. They targeted those as Democrat losses. But for us, it's a loss of power. Now, I want you to see this here. This right now is the current makeup of the Congressional Black Caucus. And so you'll see right here what's going on. Now, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, not running for re-election. Congressman Danny Davis, not running for re-election. Congressman David Scott is going to be in a brutal primary. It's like 14 people running against him. The Republicans are trying to wipe out the seat of Congressman Emmanuel Cleaver. Congressman Al Green is in a battle with Congressman Christian Menifee for that 1 seat in Texas. In Houston. Republicans in Indiana chose not to change their map, and so Congressman Andre Carson, his seat is protected. Then, of course, we have these seats here. Congressman Mark Vesey is going to be out of Congress as a result of them removing his seat, him not running. Congressman Robin Kelly, she's leaving Congress because she ran for the United States Senate, and she actually lost as well. And then if we go through the map, I believe Congressman Dwight Evans is not running for re-election. Then if we go here, if I look at the map here, let's see, they're all staying. Congressman Richie Torres is in a battle for his congressional seat against Mike Blake and others. If I go through the map, Congresswoman Sheila Sherflis McCormick was found guilty by the House Ethics Committee. She's also been indicted, and so she may very well not be running. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett will be leaving. She's going to be replaced by Pastor Frederick Haynes. She ran for the United States Senate. You see right here in Don Davis in North Carolina, they made his district more Republican. So that seat is going to be tough. Congresswoman Valerie Fouché, she won by 1% in North Carolina, so she'll get reelected. And then as we go through here, then we see folks who are here. We'll see what happens here. Former Representative Cori Bush will be battling Representative Wesley Bell in a rematch of the last election. And then if we go down here, let's see here. So these are all the members. And Congressman, of course, Sylvester Turner, he passed away last year. He's been replaced by Congressman Christian Menifee. Now, here's what I need you to understand why Virginia is so important. And so I want you to leave up this map right here. So what's going to happen if Democrats win the House? If Democrats win the House, I want you to understand what then happens. Power begins to change. So if Democrats win the House, Congressman Gregory Meeks, right here, Congressman Gregory Meeks, this is his, I'm going to go to his About page. Congressman Gregory Meeks, he'll be chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. That means all issues dealing with foreign policy, he's going to be the chair of the committee. He will control and direct what direction the committee goes in. Now, if we talk about the money, who controls the money? If Democrats control the House, Congresswoman Maxine Waters becomes chair of the House Financial Services Committee. That means all laws dealing with financial services, banks, things along those lines, all of those laws will come through her committee. How money is being apportioned and distributed is going to come through her committee. Now, we start talking about Department of Homeland Security. What then happens is if that all of a sudden, if that Democrats win, then Congressman Benny Thompson becomes chair of the Department of Homeland Committee. That means he controls the staff, he controls who gets subpoenaed, he controls all the directions. So what that means is who's in control, again, of the power. Now, if we talk about education, the chair of the Education and Workforce Committee, yep, it's going to be this brother right here, my alpha brother, Congressman Bobby Scott. Now, if y'all want to understand why this brother matters, last time when Democrats controlled the House, guess who? When y'all talk about HBCU money, do you want to know why HBCUs got $17 billion? Bobby Scott of Virginia. He was the one controlling the bill. He was controlling the money. Now, those are chairs. Now, when you talk about subcommittees in the House, meaning all of those different committees. Now, again, we're talking here, if we just do the number 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, 36, 40, 44, 48, 52, 56, 60, 62. So if you take away Warnock as well as Cory Booker, because they're in the United States Senate, you've got 60 CBC members. Y'all, 30 CBC members will become chair of subcommittees. So when you talk about the House Financial Services Committee, well, guess what? Congressman Joyce Beatty is on that committee. She'll be the chair of one of the subcommittees. And so the subcommittees do important work as well. Hank Johnson, House Armed Services Committee. We could go on and on and on. So when we talk about why the House matters, if Democrats take control of the House, meaning they win at least 218 House seats, African Americans will become chairs of several committees and the chair of 30-some subcommittees. That means no laws are going to come through the House without coming through their committee. So how you vote in Virginia could very well determine whether Democrats win the House and then take control. And, of course, keep in mind, and I know there are a lot of people don't like them, and they're like, oh, we need a change. But here's the reality. If Democrats win the House and the Democrats then choose, come on, go to my iPad. If Democrats then choose to re-elect him that as the leader, that means Hakeem Jeffries of New York is going to become the first black Speaker of the House. Y'all, we are talking political power. And when you have political power, you're controlling the purse strings. You're controlling the congressional hearings. You're controlling who gets subpoenaed. So if the Democrats control the House, that means Trump's cabinet, all are going to get called to more hearings, more accountability, more transparency, have to answer the questions. See, when all these people talk about, oh, man, you shilling for the Democrats, well, here's the whole deal. It's 4 black Republicans in the House. None of them are in leadership. It's 1 black Republican in the Senate, Tim Scott. Of those 5, what agenda do they advance for black America? I thought so. So if we're going to talk about what our agenda is, if we're going to talk about housing, if we're going to talk about black entrepreneurship, we're going to talk about economic development and education, black maternal health, and black men and prostate cancer, and on and on and on, then I would rather have folk who are in power of the committees advancing the bills. That's why the race in Virginia matters. Because if the map in Virginia is changed, and let's say Democrats pick up 4 or 5 seats, let's say that on April 21st, and early voting is taking place right now in Virginia. Right now, early voting is taking place. The election is April 21st. Poll came out showing 52 for, 47 against the referendum. Well, it don't matter how many points it wins by. If it wins 51-49, it wins. That means that when they go vote in November, map changes. Let's say the election is tight. Let's say it comes down to 218, 217. That means that pickup of 4 seats in Virginia changes the election. Just like the pickup of 4 seats in North Carolina wanted for Republicans. So I hope y'all now understand what I'm talking about when we're talking about political power, why these congressional seats matter, why the races matter. See, I don't get caught up in all that silliness. Oh man, you sitting here, you shilling for the Democrats. Anybody who says that, I will ask him, give me your 5 top issues. Give me your 5 top issues, and let's see whether Republicans support those top 5 issues right now, or whether the Democrats gonna support your 5 issues. Y'all, this ain't about party. It's about policy and power. And that's what I'm talking about. And that's why in Virginia, they are paying black Republicans to lie, obfuscate, and confuse black people. The black Republicans are being fronted. They're fronting in Virginia. They're sending out these mailers. Y'all got it pulled up right there on the screen. They are sending out these mailers to black households to convince them to vote no. They're trying to use the photos of Barack Obama. They're even running, they had this little commercial showing images of black people protesting, saying they trying to steal our right to vote. And y'all, let me tell you what they're doing. I'll tell you how they're doing it. They're not buying ads on my show. Get the video, no. Get the video ready. Get the video ready, and I want y'all to put it in a box without screens. I don't want to look like it's an ad. Let me tell you what they're doing. So pull the ad up. Tell you what they're doing. They're not buying ads through me. They're going to YouTube. I need y'all to hear what I'm saying. What they're doing is they're going to YouTube and buying the ads at YouTube to run during my show. So I was at home the other day, and I was going to YouTube, and I was looking for a video that we had run. And so I came to my channel, y'all. And so y'all know how the ad pops up, before you come on, before the show comes on. Their vote no ads were running on my show. That was by design. That was by design. And that's what they're doing. And so I just need everybody to understand this is how the dots are connected. So if you're in Virginia and you vote yes for the redistricting referendum, you could very well be deciding who controls the House. And then if Democrats control the House, that means that Black caucus members are now in power. Now, see, a lot of y'all love complaining about Democrats and Black caucus members. Well, that's why your ass should vote in the primary. That means that the type of Democrat you want, you should be pushing for in the primary. So the bottom line is, if your person wins in the primary and then they win in November, they're in office. I need our people to understand this is playing chess and not checkers. That's what I need y'all to understand. So y'all got the ad ready? Okay, all right. So I need y'all to understand what's going on here. The problem that we're dealing with is that we're allowing these loudmouths not to connect the dots. And so the referendum in Virginia, and let me be real clear, had Donald Trump and the Republicans in Texas, Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick, had they not changed the seats in Texas, California would have never done what they did. Virginia would have never done what they're trying to do right now. See, Republicans want to be mad, but they were cool when they did it. Now, let me be perfectly clear. I didn't like what Republicans did in my state of Texas. I said, leave the maps as they are. But if they gonna go ahead and do it, which I oppose, why the hell would I then say, well, Virginia Democrats, y'all shouldn't do that. California Democrats, y'all shouldn't do that. You should be fair. Well, they didn't play fair in Texas. So guess what? So I'm very clear. California, thank you for doing what you did because they screwed over my people in Texas. I vote in the 30th Congressional District in Texas. That's Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's district. I vote in that district. My parents vote in that district. So they screwed Black Texans. We went from 4 to 2. DeSantis screwed Black Floridians. Missouri, they're screwing Black people in Kansas City. North Carolina, they're screwing Black people in the 1st Congressional District in North Carolina. That dates back to the Reconstruction period. So you think I'm going to sit here and say, well, no, Democrats, you shouldn't do what they did because that's just not right. That's just not fair. For the Republicans, it's called FAFO. Y'all want to play that game? You damn right. Democrats, respond. You fire, we fire. So I support voting yes in Virginia. This is the ad that they're running on my YouTube channel, and they're running in Virginia, and they're trying to play on the emotions of Black people. And I need Black people in Virginia to understand that they are lying in this ad. Roll it.
We marched in the streets to secure our future because we know voting rights are civil rights. But now Richmond politicians want to rig our elections to help themselves, leaving us behind. Their scheme dilutes the votes of historically marginalized communities. Black and brown voices silenced. First we lose our voice, then we lose our freedom. Vote no. We fought too hard to go back now. Vote now and vote no.
Let me say this right now. I'm Roland Martin. I do not approve of that message. That's Black Republicans, white Republicans using blackface, a Black little group. They're funding them to run those ads and funding them to run these mailers. So I need all y'all, if you know folks in Virginia, Black, white, Latino, Asian American, Native American, no matter, I need you to explain to them why they should be voting yes. Don't wait until April 21st. They should be voting right now, early voting, vote yes, because Virginia could decide who controls the U.S. House come the new Congress, January 2029. And let me tell y'all what's going on. Pull the graphic up. Next Thursday, I need everybody, if you're where Virginia State is, next Thursday, I need y'all to be in the house. Pull it up right here. I need y'all to be in the house at Virginia State next Thursday. We are going to be on the campus there in Virginia. We're going to have a panel taking place. Virginia State University, Harris Hall, Academic Commons, 20903 University Avenue, Petersburg, Virginia. Senator Tim Kaine, Senator Mark Warner, Virginia Speaker of the House Don Scott, Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan, and others are going to be there. We're going to be talking about political power, talking about redistricting in Virginia, talking about what then happens if Democrats take control of the House and the Senate, what that means for African Americans in Virginia, African Americans in this country. So that's going to be on Thursday, April 9th. And so we want to pack the house out, spread the word. Now, the next day, we're going to be at Norfolk State. Norfolk State, the next day, Friday, April 10th, Norfolk State, Dorothy B. Brothers Auditorium, 700 Park Avenue. We're going to again be, Congressman Bobby Scott will be there, Don Scott, Speaker of the House, Senator Mark Warner, Senator Tim Kaine. We're going to have Senator Louise Lucas and other elected officials who are going to be there. Same conversation. We're talking about public policy. So we're going on the road April 9th and April 10th. Virginia State on Thursday, Norfolk State on Friday. We want y'all to be in the house and pack this thing out. Y'all, you always hear me talking about power. You always hear me talking about how we must be using our power. And I keep telling you, and this is the problem that I have, too many of us are leaving our power at home. We're sitting here mad, upset. They ain't doing this. They ain't doing that. Y'all, I'm all about one thing, winning. I'm all about us being in control of the whole deal. And this was the thing. Fox News did an article on Senator Louise Lucas, who was talking about 10-1. And then she put this graphic out in responding to Fox News. She said, you all started it, and we're effing finished it. Talking about the 10-1 plan. So I hope y'all now understand what I'm talking about is when you vote yes in Virginia, how that special election on April 21st, early voting has already started, could decide the fate of the entire country as to who controls the House. And why is Donald Trump, why did Donald Trump desperately want to get those 5 seats in Texas and desperately do political gerrymandering elsewhere? Because he said it. Republicans, if y'all lose the House, they gonna impeach me. You damn right, because your ass is corrupt. So these corrupt pardons, if the Democrats control the House, they now can do it. They can now have subpoenas and call to testify the people who've been paying for pardons. They can now investigate, by controlling the committee, all of Donald Trump's shady crypto deals. They can now investigate all of those different things. Because when you control the gavel and you control the committee, you control the subpoenas and you control the hearings. And that's why Donald Trump is scared of losing the House. And if Democrats flip the Senate, that means if they win, keep their seat in Georgia, Senator John Ossoff, keep their seat in Michigan, all they need are 4 seats, y'all. If they flip Maine, flip Alaska, flip North Carolina, they can flip Iowa, now they got 51-49. They could pick up 2 other seats. Democrats could have a 53-47 majority in the Senate. That now means not one Donald Trump appointee can be approved unless Democrats approve it. Not one, because we saw the news, Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito got sick at the Fairless Society dinner last month, got rushed to the hospital. If something happens to one of his Supreme Court justices, Democrats can say, no, we're not going to have a hearing. Republicans can yell, holler, and scream. Democrats, all they should say is, remember Merrick Garland? Remember how y'all held up those 100 federal judges when Obama was president? Mitch McConnell held them up. Democrats can do the exact same thing. Mitch McConnell refused to let Obama Obama appointed 100 federal judges. Mitch McConnell would not let them get confirmed. So when Donald Trump came in 2017, Donald Trump was able to appoint 100 federal judges that Mitch McConnell held up. If Democrats win the Senate, payback is a mother. They can do the exact same thing. Y'all, this is a power conversation. This is why we must vote yes in Virginia. And we must take these people, take MAGA out in every single state, beat them, overwhelm the voting system in every state, in Georgia, in North Carolina, in Florida. If you want to beat MAGA, don't tweet about it. Don't post on Facebook. Don't put it on TikTok. You do it at the ballot box. If you want to show them what black power looks like, you do what black people did in 2008. We turned out in massive numbers when Obama was elected. That's why they're changing the laws, because they are scared of what happened in 2008. In 2008 was the first time in American history that black people voted at a larger percentage than white people in America. It had never happened before, and it hasn't happened since, because too many of us have chosen to sit on the sidelines and not get in the game. It's time for us to get back in the game and to show MAGA we mean business. Back in a moment.
Why does it feel like we're going backward? Voting rights under attack, schools stripped of funding, black history erased. This is the Trump MAGA agenda. They want to take us back. They are redrawing congressional lines in states across the country, deciding who gets power and who gets silenced. We see what this is, a power grab. Virginians won't be fooled. Show up, vote, take back our power. It's a temporary measure that gives the people, not politicians, the final say. Vote yes by April 21st.
How you doing? I'm Mark Curry, and you're watching the Black Star Network. That's why I got these glasses on, because that black star is bright.
I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
April 3rd, 1968, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his last sermon at Mason Temple. The next day, he was assassinated at the Lorraine Motel. A few years ago, when I was at TV One, Keith Miller came on the show, discussed his book. It is called Martin Luther King's Biblical Epic, His Final Great Speech. He discussed and he walked through how major this speech was. Y'all have heard me say this. For too many of us, we've only heard this part of the sermon.
I call this speech a famous speech, but also...
Oh, no, go to my iPad.
Has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
So that speech is called the Mountaintop Speech, and so many of us, we only played that part. But that was a 43-minute, 16-second epic speech. And so here's my conversation as Keith Miller talks about that entire speech in our conversation.
But also an unknown speech. It's famous because the last 2 minutes are famous, especially when he talks about going up to the top of the mountain and looking out to see the promised land, but I may not get there with you. But we as a people will get to the promised land. That part is famous, and people think that he's predicting his assassination the next day. But the rest of the speech is overlooked. But in order to understand the conclusion, you need to understand the entire speech, because if he only wanted to speak for 2 minutes, he would have spoken for 2 minutes. So he spoke for 46 minutes, so he spoke for 46 minutes. The conclusion concludes something. So in order to understand the conclusion, you have to understand the whole speech.
Well, it's the same thing I say every year when it comes to I Have a Dream speech. That was never even in the original written version. And again, as we focus on that as opposed to looking at the entire thing, always from a black church standpoint, I say we focus on the hoop part. That's the hoop part, but you better understand the thesis in the scripture earlier in the speech.
Exactly what I'm saying.
Earlier in the speech. So one of the things that you lay out, the architecture of the church played a role in this? What do you mean by that?
I think the architecture of the church is very important, and it's been misrepresented by historians. They call it, quote, cavernous. It's not cavernous at all. It's an architectural jewel, and it's beautifully and brilliantly designed.
Mason Temple.
Mason Temple in Memphis. It seats 3,734 people. I know because I counted the seats. So, but somehow the architect was so brilliant that he could get these seats close to the pulpit. So if there hadn't been 3,000 people able to come to this speech, King would not have given the speech at all, because this was the largest venue in the entire South that African Americans controlled. And King was exhausted. He was in his motel room that night. He didn't want to give the speech, and he gave the speech because Ralph Abernathy told him, there's 3,000 people here. We need to, you need to come down here, Martin. If he had been anywhere else, there wouldn't have been that many people there, because there was a giant thunderstorm that night that kept a lot of people away.
You say that King made it clear that the oppressed must focus on the Bible and, as you say, lift themselves above the persistent exploitation that they doggedly endure.
Yes, the speech offers King's interpretation of the Bible, and it's very important to understand that. He does something of a tour of the Bible in the speech. He starts out with the Exodus. He quotes Jeremiah. He quotes Isaiah. He quotes Amos. He has a long passage in the speech where he's talking about the parable of the Good Samaritan. And his professors in seminary taught him that the Bible was an ancient document. It's ancient history. It's ancient literature. You need to be an expert on the ancient past in order to understand it, and his Old Testament professor was an archaeologist. But King says, no, anybody can understand the Bible because we are living in the Bible. And what's going on in Memphis is a new chapter in the Exodus. The Exodus is a story that keeps going on. For him, the Bible is only incidentally a book. The Bible is an ongoing narrative. The Exodus is still going on. The civil rights movement is a new chapter in the Exodus, and he has a similar interpretation of the parable of the Good Samaritan.
Keith, what do you think? What do you make of the part of the speech where he says, if God were to ask him what time period would he like to live in, he would pick the second half of the 20th century? Why do you think he would pick that?
That's important because before King got to Memphis, the national press was paying zero attention to Memphis and the garbage workers' strike. The garbage workers are all
They were ignoring him, too.
Sure. And they were ignoring him, too, right. They were trying to write him off. So when he gets there, he takes this Memphis strike, which the press is ignoring, and he's saying, he's lining it up with these great events in history. I want to go back in time. I want to go back to the Exodus. I want to go back to the Emancipation Proclamation. And he's lining up the strike in Memphis with these great events in history. He's saying this is so important, as opposed to the news media are not even paying attention to Memphis. So he's redesigning the strike.
And this has got to be, one of the speeches that I probably paid most attention to over the course of my career. I saw it as a roadmap. I saw it as, King's way of lining out what justice really looks like. He says in this speech, let the issues remain where they are. The issue is justice. And he lines out that it is economic freedom, that it is political freedom, that it is a whole host of things. And so I guess I ask you, if you were talking to the young people of Ferguson today, if you were talking to the young people who filled the streets in New York or D.C., what salient point do you think they ought to take from this particular writing?
King focuses on justice, and that's the reason to focus on the Exodus, because the Exodus is a story of escaping from oppression and escaping from slavery. What King is, to me, what he's saying about the present is, you are important, your issue is important, oppression can still be going on, we may need another Exodus, and you may live in some tiny town, you may live in a small neighborhood in a giant city, you may think that you're not important, but these ordinary people, these strikers in Memphis, who most of them dropped out of high school, they were important players in an important drama. So he's saying that people who think they might be ordinary are capable of extraordinary deeds. And that's what fueled the civil rights movement, the masses of people who look like ordinary people who are making extraordinary sacrifices and creating extraordinary accomplishments.
The book is an amazing book. It is Martin Luther King's biblical epic, his final great speech by Keith D. Miller. Folks, certainly read the book, but definitely you want to hear the speech. I'm glad you broke it down, Keith, because a lot of people, literally, only hear that last part. They totally ignore the other 45 minutes, if you will. Right. And it is an absolutely phenomenal speech there. We appreciate it. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you, sir.
All right, folks. Again, this is a copy of the book here. You heard him talking about Mason Temple. Here we go to my iPad. We were there in 2018 for the 50th commemoration of the assassination of Dr. King. This is me talking to our dear brother Bernard Lafayette, who just passed away last month. You can see how massive that church was. And so if you go to our YouTube channel, just simply type in Roland Martin and MLK 50, and you can look at all the coverage that we had from Memphis in 2018. There were so many different things we covered. The unveiling the I Am a Man monument at Claiborne Temple as well. And so, again, y'all can check that out. All right, folks, quick break. We come back. I have an interview, y'all. We showed a clip of a white pastor in Montana, man, who railed at Trump. This man was a part of the moral majority. And he's talking about how these white evangelicals, these white conservative evangelicals, have completely sold out America for profit by lining up with Donald Trump. It's a conversation you do not want to miss. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Support the work that we do. Join our Brina Funk fan club. You want to give via Cash App, use the Stripe QR code. You see it right here. That's for credit cards as well. Checks and money order. Make them out to Roland Martin Unfiltered, P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037 0196. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered, Venmo RM Unfiltered, Zelle, Roland at RolandSMartin.com, Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Back in a moment.
MAGA Republicans ended diversity programs, cut funding for black students, and fired federal employees. And they won't stop there. Now, they've redrawn congressional maps so that they can rig the November elections. But we have the power to stop them. By voting yes for fair elections, we have the final say on who represents us in Congress. This is a temporary measure to restore fairness. They are not backing down, and neither can we. Make a plan to vote by April 21st and vote yes for fair elections.
My name is Bill Duke, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Folks, Donald Trump is in power because white conservative evangelicals have stood fiercely behind him. They have covered up for his misdeeds. They have ignored the heinous things that he has said about women and other people. They have chosen to do a deal with the devil. A couple days ago in the White House, there was a meeting that they had there. It was a Holy Week meeting, and among the folks speaking was Paula White. She heads Trump faith-based effort. And in this part of her comments, folks, unbelievable, how she compared Donald Trump to Jesus Christ. Listen.
Mr. President, no one has paid the price like you have paid the price. It almost cost you your life. You were betrayed and arrested and falsely accused. It's a familiar pattern that our Lord and Savior showed us. But it didn't end there for him, and it didn't end there for you. God always had a plan. On the third day, he rose, he defeated evil, he conquered death, hell, and the grave. And because he rose, we all know that we can rise. And sir, because of his resurrection, you rose up. Because he was victorious, you were victorious. And I believe that the Lord said to tell you this. Because of his victory, you will be victorious in all you put your hand to. Amen. Because God is with you and God is using you to defeat evil, to restore families, to awaken the church, to harvest the nations, and to bring a worldwide revival. So I'm going to ask something. Would you all stand and just, if you're comfortable, stretch your hand towards our president? And even if Reverend Graham, you'd like to lay hands on him, and Pastor Robert, and just come in agreement with me. For 2 Chronicles 7:14 declares, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, then I will hear from heaven and forgive their sins and heal their land. So today we humble ourselves and we seek you, Lord Jesus. You declared in Proverbs 14:34 that it said the righteousness exalts a nation.
I literally can't even play all of that because y'all know that man is a fake Christian. You know he ain't real. And if you want to know that, this is what he said. He spoke for about an hour to these people. And see, the White House, it was supposed to be private. Well, those idiots actually uploaded the whole ceremony. And we actually got a chance to hear Trump say this, and those faith leaders said nothing.
Because the United States can't take care of daycare. That has to be up to a state. We can't take care of daycare. We're a big country. We have 50 states. We have all these other people. We're fighting wars. We can't take care of daycare. You got to let a state take care of daycare, and they should pay for it, too. They should pay. They have to raise their taxes, but they should pay for it. And we could lower our taxes a little bit to them to make up for, but it's not possible for us to take care of daycare. Medicaid, Medicare, all these individual things, they can do it on a state basis. You can't do it on a federal. We have to take care of one thing, military protection.
Those faith folks sat there, and what this man said, oh yeah, we can't help people with their kids. We can't help people with daycare, but we can buy more bombs. The United States is almost spending $1 trillion on the military. Trump wants to increase the military budget even more. It will be over $1 trillion. A couple months ago, we showed you this clip of a pastor out of Montana. who spoke against what Donald Trump is doing. And I didn't know who he was. I had never heard of Pastor Chuck Baldwin until I saw this clip. But here was a white preacher talking to his congregation about Donald Trump.
None of us is perfect. Real Christians understand these things. They are given to forgiveness and understanding because we all know that Jesus was forgiving and understanding toward us. That's not what we're talking about with Donald Trump. That's not it at all. Donald Trump is a lifelong gangster. He's a lifelong Zionist. He is a lifelong philanderer. He's a lifelong cheat. He's a lifelong hedonist. He's a lifelong felon. He's a lifelong blackmailer. He's a lifelong bully. He's a lifelong malignant narcissist. And he's a lifelong sexual predator. And since he's been president, he has now joined the ranks of international war criminals and mass murderers. If you have taken the time to look at even some of the newly released, I'll call them e-files, you know what I'm talking about. If you have taken the time to look at even some of the newly released e-files, you know that Donald J. Trump, along with the rest of the rich and famous predators in those files, should spend the rest of his life in prison. And even if he did, that would not balance the scales of justice owed by this degenerate monster. And yet, knowing all of this, there are still thousands of pastors and Christians who continue to give Trump their undying support. From a moral, ethical, legal, and spiritual perspective, how can these pastors and Christians not be party to Trump's corruption? By supporting him, lauding him, defending him, excusing him, they are party to his criminality.
I was like, who is this? So I had my producer, Carol, reach out. His name is Chuck Baldwin. He is pastor of Liberty Fellowship in Killa, Montana. He preached about the divine litmus test and how preachers who look like him are not embodying the true essence of being a Christian. He is someone who you'll find out in this conversation. He was very much involved with the moral majority, very much involved with right-wing ideologues who were preachers. He was a chaplain for the Oath Keepers. The Southern Poverty Law Center has criticized him for his alignment. We talked about that as well. But he laid it out in terms of what needs to happen in this country. He calls out these white conservative evangelicals. In our conversation, he talks about the discussions that should be happening with preachers, whether they're left or right, blue or red, Democrat or Republican or independent. And also, he had some absolutely tough words for the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, calling him a war criminal and an absolute white nationalist. Here's my conversation with Pastor Chuck Baldwin. Pastor Norman, I'm so glad to have you here. When I saw your video, I was happy to see it. Listen, I'm a Christian. the Catholic Church I was born and raised in. It started in my grandparents' living room. My wife is an ordained minister. She was education minister at our church in Houston, Brook Island Baptist Church. And listen, we understand the faith. And I have been extremely concerned when I look at a lot of conservative evangelicals and driving this ideology, a political ideology with faith. And so when you said what you had to say, what was the spark? What caused you to say, I need to say this publicly to my congregation?
Well, first of all, Roland, thank you for letting me be on your program. I appreciate it very much. I appreciate all that you're doing. Your voice is a major voice in our country that we need, and I thank you for doing it. What motivated me was probably the same thing that motivates you. It is abhorrent and reprehensible to me to see how the Republican Party in particular and Donald Trump specifically have co-opted the mostly white evangelical churches of our country. I think there's a couple reasons for that. Neither one of them are acceptable. But by doing what they're doing is they are alienating a huge number of people, not only in America, but around the world, against Christianity. They're not drawing people to Christ with this rhetoric, pro-war, pro-genocide, pro-Christian nationalism, and all that nonsense. They are literally driving people away from the gospel. And that bothers me immensely. And I just feel that if we pastors do not speak out with our podiums, then we are failing to resist the evil that is being perpetrated in our country today. So I just feel like it's my duty as a minister and as an American to speak out.
I know a number. I know Christians, pastors who are Republican. I know Christians who are pastors or Democrats. I have no problem with people having different political points of view. Right. There are a lot of African American preachers I know, a lot of African Americans who say I might be conservative in certain things in my life, and also when it comes to my faith, but they also look at when you look at public policy in a different way. The issue that I really have is when I listen to these folks who say, and they preach from the pulpit, you can't be a Democrat if you're a Christian, or how dare you take that position because this is where Jesus stands. Yet, when I look at what Jesus talked about, when I think about this being Good Friday, when I listen to Jesus talked about the poor, talked about how do we help everyday people, the people Jesus sat with, the people who were not the most popular folks in the world, I hear something totally different when I'm listening to these evangelicals and what they tout, and they would rather be more aligned with the rich than the poor, with the folks in mansions and not the downtrodden. And I just sit here and go, we're speaking about two different Jesuses.
Yeah, what we have is the politicization of religion. And you're exactly right. They have politicized their faith system to the point that their faith system is dependent upon their politics. And therefore, they judge everyone else's faith by their politics. And I've said many times from my pulpit that there are no Democrat Christians or Republican Christians or independent Christians. There are no American Christians or Canadian Christians or Iranian Christians or Russian Christians. We're just Christians. The new covenant of Jesus Christ makes us all one in the body of Christ, regardless of our nationality, our ethnicity, our race, our politics, our geographical location, our financial status, none of that matters. If we know Christ as our Savior, we are one in Christ by faith. And that's what the new covenant is all about. And I fear, and this is my biggest fear from a theological point of view, is that all of this politicization of religion has hidden the new covenant, obfuscated the new covenant, to the point that Christian people don't even understand the new covenant anymore. Literally, they're living in the Old Testament, where there was this division between God's people, the Israelites, and the Gentile nations of the world. Obviously, there were exceptions to that, even in the Old Testament. But they have taken the Old Testament and they are interpreting the New Testament by the Old Testament. That's wrong. We need to be interpreting the Old Testament by the New Testament. The New Covenant fulfilled and abolished the Old Covenant. But they don't understand that. They're still living under the Mosaic system. And that is very, very dangerous, because that's not what Jesus gave to us through his death and resurrection. He gave to us a new covenant where they were all one in Christ. He broke down the barriers, the wall that separates us racially, politically, nationally, ethnically, and any other way. Those divisions are now all broken down by the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ.
As we were talking, I pulled up, there's this X account, Twitter account called Right Wing Watch. And it said, MAGA pastor Mark Burns at CPAC 2026, Christian nationalists have been too silent and must rise up. And then, and I'm sure you saw what took place a couple of days ago when these faith leaders convened at the White House. And the stuff that came out of Paula White's mouth, Trump being persecuted like Jesus. But then when I listened to what he said, he is speaking to a room full of faith people, and he says, well, you know, we don't have the money for daycare and Medicare and Medicaid, but we need the money for war, essentially. And I'm sitting there going, how did not one faith leader say, I don't call him, I don't use the word president, but let's just say, I'm sorry, Mr. President, as a person of faith, I simply cannot sit and be silent.
Yeah.
As you say, let's not take care of folk health care and the children, but let's fund war. I just sat there and I was like, like, really?
Yeah. Well, first of all, those faith leaders are a disgrace. And we have to recognize that these men and women have literally sold their soul to power. And I don't know how much you know about my background, but I was there at the beginning of the moral majority back in the days of Jerry Falwell. I graduated from Liberty University. Jerry and I were good friends. I've flown with him on his jet. He's spoken at my congregation that I had down in Florida, which was a large congregation of 2,000 members. I spoke for him in Lynchburg. We traveled together to conferences domestically and internationally. So I was real close, and I was on the inside of that movement. I saw it from the inside, and I can tell you that while I believe that many of the grassroots men that were involved in that had really good hearts, the bottom line that came out of that movement was a marriage between the Republican Party and evangelical Christianity, at least white evangelical Christianity. It was a literal marriage that took place. From that point onward until today, to be a good Christian, you have to be a Republican. And to be a good faith leader, you have to sell your soul to the Republican Party. And that's a general statement that is absolutely true. I was there and I saw it, so I know what I'm talking about. But beyond that, with the advent of the Trump administrations, especially the second one, I believe what we have is a cult that has developed within white evangelicalism. I really do believe that. And I think that there's several reasons for it. I think the biggest reason for it is the evangelical support for the state of Israel, quite frankly. I believe that their perverted doctrine of eschatology has allowed Zionist Israel to control the theology, especially eschatology, in white evangelical churches.
And for the people who don't know, what is eschatology?
That's the study of end times, prophecy. So the entire evangelical Christian world, well, I say not the entire, 80% of the evangelical Christian, which basically, if you look at it from a statistical perspective, we're talking about Baptists of all varieties, whether they're Independent Baptist, Southern Baptist, Northern Baptist, General Association Baptist. There's 100 different types of Baptists. But the Baptist denominations and the Pentecostal / charismatic / Assembly of God type churches comprise the largest congregations nationally. And they are the ones that have adopted Schofieldism, which is premillennial dispensationalism, which is Christian Zionism. They're all synonymous for the same mode of thinking. That their understanding of prophecy, eschatology, depends on the modern state of Israel. They believe that Zionist Israel, founded in 1948, is a resurrected Old Testament Israel. They equate Benjamin Netanyahu to a resurrected King David. They believe that Jesus cannot come in return until events in Israel take place, and that Israel is the linchpin of the second coming of Christ. And everything about their prophetic beliefs is founded on Israel. It is so bad, Roland, that if you took Zionist Israel out of their faith system regarding Christianity, they would not have a faith system. And I don't say that lightly. I have talked to too many of them. I've debated them, and I've seen what they're saying. They have wrapped their entire view of biblical prophecy around the state of Israel. But prophecy is not about Israel. Prophecy is about Jesus. When John wrote the book of Revelation, it was the revelation of Jesus Christ, not the revelation of Israel. But they have become enamored with the state of Israel to the point that it dominates everything they believe about the New Testament.
You might remember this. This took place in 2003. Bob Riley was the governor of Alabama, Republican, Christian conservative. That's what he called himself. And he wanted to reform the tax code in Alabama. He felt that Alabama was taxing the poor far too early, and in terms of amount of income. And it was a $1.2 billion tax overhaul. So they were taxing people in Alabama beginning at $4,600 a year. In Mississippi, they started at $19,000. The Chamber of Commerce was behind this, many groups. He actually used Jesus as the campaign model. He said, what would Jesus do? He's campaigning hard for this. This is a man who got the white conservative evangelical vote to become governor. When the election night hit, it lost 65 to 35. Those same conservative evangelicals that put him in the governor's mansion voted against this. And I said then, and I still say today, they chose their personal pocketbook over their Bible. And the whole campaign, he was literally campaigning, talking about Jesus and the poor, and he would go around saying, what would Jesus do? And those conservative evangelicals said, we don't care, forget that, you keep taxing the poor. That to me was a perfect example of where many of these white conservative evangelicals stand. They yell, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. They want to hit people with scripture. They want to say, we condemn you Democrats on abortion. We condemn you on LGBTQ. We condemn you. But how you vote to keep taxing the poor?
Yeah, and it's really worse than that, because at the same time that they're doing what you talk about, they have no problem with the billionaire class that we now know as the Epstein class. And that's exactly what that class is. It's the Epstein class. It's a perverted, degenerate, criminal class of super wealthy that believe they are above the law and whose criminal conduct is among the most vile, wicked, atrocious behavior in the history of mankind. I'm praying, and I have optimism to believe that this is going to come out. They're doing their best to hide it. They're not going to be able to hide it forever. People are going to know names. They are going to know evidence. And I believe there will be accountability. And I believe that a lot of things that are happening right now in the war in Iran are nothing more than a distraction and a cover-up for that. But nevertheless, the same Christians that are doing what you're talking about on the one side, there's another side to that. They have no problem whatsoever with giving the Epstein class billionaires a total exemption from taxes. You know, most people, well, I'm not sure if most people know, but I know a lot of people know that the wealthiest people in the United States pay often the least amount of taxes. They have a bevy of lawyers that know how to take advantage of the tax loopholes and can avoid paying taxes. And so, you know, some of the largest corporations in the United States don't pay any taxes or very minimal. And many of the richest people in the United States pay very little taxes. And whenever you make that observation known to these same white evangelicals, they're fine with that. You know, they think, oh, you know, they're smart, or you know, they have, I don't know what their excuse is, but they have no problem at all with the super wealthy using legal loopholes to not support the basic functions of civil government. And so what I'm saying to you is that I think what the example you're using is only one half of it, because when you look at the other half, they're just as guilty. So the thinking of these people is warped by politics, by Republican politics. That's what I go back to when I said in the 1980s and 90s, the marriage, and I call it a marriage because it's an unholy union, but it's a union nonetheless between the Republican Party and white evangelical Christianity. And that marriage is intact today. So, you know, they condemn and I do, whenever, you know, I don't look at Republican and Democrat. I look at right and wrong. When Democrat presidents are in the White House, they do things that I believe are unconstitutional or unchristian. I challenge them publicly. And then I'm a hero. But whenever Republicans are president, I do the same thing. When they commit unconstitutionality or wars of aggression or unchristian behavior, I call them out. Well, then I'm a traitor. So it's all about politics. And that's the most disturbing part about that. As Christian ministers, we should be the most apolitical people that you will ever meet. You know, our responsibility is to speak the word of truth without fear or favor. We should be men and women who are not trying to gained something material from being on the quote correct side of politics. But those faith leaders that you saw in the Oval Office, every one of them are benefiting financially from their support of President Trump. And it's been that way for as long as I can remember. It's not just Trump, it's all of them. So when you see these guys and gals doing all of this, they're not doing it out of pure biblical conviction. They also have a financial stake in the matter. And that's the sickening part. To me, that's the sickening part. We should not let anything, money or praise or popularity or unpopularity or criticism, either way, affect what we believe is the truth from God to tell the people.
You just said in terms of the criticism that you'll get, and you've been called ultra-conservative, right-wing, folks, alliance with oath keepers and all those things. What was the shift? What was the wake-up call for you where you went, and it was a whole lot that I was involved in? You talked about moral majority, and I've talked to other Frank Schaeffer and others who were there at the beginning. They were the sons of folks involved in the movement. And see, when I think of Paul Weyrich in 1981 in Dallas saying we don't want everybody to vote, here was somebody who was founder of the moral majority, founder of the Heritage Foundation. And so, but was it one thing, what was the wake-up call for you where you said, oh, where these folks are going, I can't be aligned with this?
Good question. Thank you for asking that question. When I was in moral majority, I was there on the ground floor, as I said. So I saw the inside, and we could talk for an hour just on that. So I was there. I know most all the names that you could talk about. I've met most of the people you could talk about. I spoke on the same platforms as most of the people you're talking about, traveled with them. I mean, I was there. I was very young. I was about 29 years old when I first started. I didn't understand most of what all of this was about. I trusted my mentors. You know, when you're a young adult, you're trained and schooled in a certain philosophy, whatever it is, whether it's secular or religious, you tend to look up to, respect, and rightfully so, and then embrace what you've been taught. And then, you know, when I got on my own in my own congregation, I regurgitated most of what I was taught. You said the wake-up call. Okay, so I'll tell you when the wake-up call came for me. There was a mini wake-up call in 1996, and then the real wake-up call in 2003. So the mini wake-up call was when the Republican Party was nominating Bob Dole to be their presidential candidate. And I knew Bob Dole's record. I knew what he was politically, and it was unacceptable to everything I understood about constitutional law and American government. And I would not support him. And there's a long story about that. We had a big convention down in Orlando, and I was the chairman of the Escambia County Republican delegation, and I went down there and we vocally opposed Bob Dole, and we were the off-scouring of the convention. But anyway, so things that happened to Joe Scarborough and I were good friends at that time. I had a nationally syndicated radio talk show. Joe was in Congress. He went in there without my radio talk show, and he admitted that himself. His parents told me that in person. So we had a good working relationship, and the bottom line, I reached a point where that the pressure on me was, look, we've got, for the good of the party, the unity of the party, blah, 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 you've got to, you're the last holdout, I'm the last major voice in Republican politics that's not on board with Bob Dole. And I've got, and so Joe put the pressure on me, and I confess to you, Roland, and I'm not proud of this. I'm ashamed of it. I relented, and I met Bob and Joe at the airport in Pensacola, Florida, and press was all there, and I endorsed him. I still had my protest pins on, but I endorsed him. And then I went out to my car in the parking lot of the airport and threw up. And I felt so sick. And I vowed I'd never do that again, and I haven't. That was the first mini wake-up call. Then the thing that put me over the edge was in the George W. Bush administration in 2003, when he decided to take America to war and send American troops unconstitutionally, unjustly, illegally, immorally to war in Afghanistan and Iraq. And when he did that, I was still on my radio show, and I said, no, that's a bridge too far. And I devoted myself to opposing G.W. Bush and his policies at that point. Well, that created everything else that came afterward. So when you ask for the wake-up calls, those were the two things that really shook me and forced me to be objective from a moral, Christian, constitutional view, and not be swayed by position, power, and politics.
And also oath keepers. When you talk, when issue of COVID, and again, what's interesting here, and I guarantee you, there's people say, "Well, I can't believe you're talking to this guy," because you've had folks say, "Oh my goodness, this guy has been aligned with these anti-government right-wing Christians, and oh my God, he's a zealot." And then when you made these comments about Trump, I remember I saw Occupy Democrats had posted something, and people were shocked by this. And so where you sit now, how do you define yourself? Because earlier you said, I don't look at Republican Christians because it's like you're sort of like, I'm going to say in no man's land, but that whole infrastructure that exists out there, they probably looking at you going, come on, man, what are you doing?
Yeah, I can understand that. I have a problem with that, but most of those people don't really know me. Even when I had my big church down in Florida, we had a large minority percentage of our congregation. And I've spoken at all black churches many times. Some of the best friends I have today are black people, and I've never had a problem. I've been accused by people like the SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center, and other what I would call far left organizations that have accused me of all kinds of things, erroneously and falsely. And I'm used to that. These people don't really know me. They take certain things I say out of context, and then they build a case against me publicly, and that's fine. I mean, they have a right to their opinion. They most of them don't really know me. But the Oath Keeper thing, so when I was asked in, 2013 to be the chaplain of Oath Keepers, I went over the statements, the bylaws, or whatever you want to call them, the articles of faith, to use a religious term, of what they were all about. And what they said was they were about defending the Constitution and protecting the Constitution. And I support that. because the Constitution protects the freedoms of all Americans, not just a certain class, not just a certain race, not just a certain religion. The Constitution makes us all equal under the law. And I'm for the Constitution. I'm for the rule of law. And I believe that we should all be treated the same under the law, that there are no special privileged people under the law, and that our constitutional form of government has provided the greatest freedom for all people that any human government has ever provided in the history of humanity. So I support the Constitution. So it was attractive to me. And I agreed to be and I'm glad I was providentially because, and this is another long story that we could talk about another time, but if you remember, Bundyville took place down in Nevada while I was a chaplain there. And there were some very legitimate considerations that were going on there. The federal government was not behaving in a constitutional manner. And there needed to be some people to protest the abuse of power by the federal government in that case. And I believe very much in freedom for all Americans. And I do not support in any shape, manner, or form the abuse of power by government. And I think that every American citizen should be alarmed when any abuse of power takes place by governing officials. And I support it across the board. I don't care about whether it's liberal or conservative or black or white. It doesn't matter to me if the government officials are not abiding by their sworn duty to uphold the Constitution. It's the job of the American people to rise up and resist that. So I was proud to go down and be a part of that. I had the opportunity as a chaplain to speak to the body of men that had assembled down there. And I told them, and all this is on videotape, I said, look, if we are going to have God's blessing on what we do, we cannot break the law ourselves, that we must be law abiders. We cannot criticize people in government for breaking the law if we turn around and break the law ourselves. And I said that we have to be sure that what we are doing is right under God, under law, and we have to do that which is right ourselves in the way that we protest, in the way that we appeal to the freedoms of all men. And so I think that had an impact. And I'd like to think that what I had to say to those fellows helped to temper some of the feelings and some of the emotions that took place on that occasion. And thank God there was no bloodshed. There was no violence at all. And I want to tell you, that was a tinderbox situation that could have gone bad really, really fast. And it didn't. And I would hope to think that my presence there and my appearance before those men and what I said to them helped in that regard. But what happened was when the COVID situation came around, Stewart, who was the president, he went whole hog in support of the lockdowns, churches disassembling. You can't meet for Easter services. You can't meet for Sunday services. You can't meet for prayer meetings. You have to close your church. You have to. And I said, no. And we stayed open the whole time. And whenever Stewart came out with that pronouncement, I immediately, the next day, I sent him my resignation letter, and I haven't been a part of it since. And I'm glad, with a good conscience, that I walked away. So, yeah, that was the story for that. But the people that have criticized me have, I think for the most part, taken things out of context, and they don't really know him. I had a young black man. If I have time to tell this, it's a short story. I had a young black man up in Chicago who was a college student, and who saw something that I had written about the Second Amendment. I'm very pro Second Amendment. I believe that all Americans have a right to defend themselves legally under the law. And I had written about that. And this young man had gotten in with a group of anti-Second Amendment zealots in college. And he wrote me a threatening letter. He threatened to kill me and my family. So, and I've had threats before, and you know, that's just the way it goes when you're in public eye. So I went, the state attorney, they're called district attorneys in some districts. I went to him as a personal friend of mine, and I said, here, I got this death threat. And he said, well, you know, he said, we take this very seriously. This is a violation of law. He said, if you want, he said, we can bring him down here and you can sit down and have a talk with him. We won't press charges unless you ask us to. But he said, it'll give you a chance to meet with him one-on-one. And I thought, you know, that's a great idea. I'd like to meet this young man. Come to find out, he was a child of a pastor up there in Chicago. And his mom and dad knew nothing of what he had done and who he was associating with in college. And they were heartbroken, and you can imagine. So anyway, they all flew down. He flew down in handcuffs. And we had a meeting at the state attorney's office. In my heart of hearts, I knew I was not going to press charges. I knew that even before I met him. But I wanted to meet him face to face. I wanted him to see me. And I wanted him to see the people around me. So when we came in and met, I had probably 15 or 20 of my black brothers and sisters from my congregation join me at that meeting, and my family, and my children were small. And so the young man, I said, look, here's who I am, you know, and I said, I love you as a fellow American, as a fellow brother in Christ. You know, I understand your dad's a preacher. I'm a preacher. You know, I love preachers' families. And I said, you know, I want you to know who I am. Here's my wife. Here's my kids. And then these black brothers and sisters from my church came out one-on-one and talked to him and told him a little bit about them and told him a little bit about us as a congregation and who we were and how we loved each other and the spirit of love and unity that we had among each other. And, you know, and when he saw that, you know, he was probably 20 years old, and I mean, it changed him. He saw that things are not just black and white, and I don't mean that from a racial, but I mean that from a abstract. You know, things are not. But you just can't categorize people and generalize. Oh, he's a white man, so I have a negative opinion about him. He's a black man, so I have a negative opinion about him. No, that's not what Christianity is all about. That's not what Americanism is all about. And so, you know, of course, I didn't press charges, and he had no charge, no time, no nothing whatsoever. But it gave us an opportunity for me to meet him, for him to meet me, and it was a good thing for both of us. And so, you know, that's the kind of thing that nobody knows about Chuck Baldwin. That's the kind of thing that people will never read in a newspaper or see on a television broadcast. So I understand that people can take things that they say and form whatever opinions, but God knows who I am, and I'm happy with who I am, and I'm happy to be on your show, and I love you for what you're doing, and nothing could ever change that.
I wrote my book called White Fear, How the Browning of America is Making White Folks Lose Their Minds. And
good title.
It scared a lot of folks. But what I said in this book was, I said that what we are facing right now, and I called it in 2009 when I was at CNN,
is that there's this fear of the nation becoming a majority people of color. I said it's in public policy. I said people don't want to confront it. When I look at a lot of when I study the rhetoric, and what I said was, what is really needed is not black folks talking to white Americans. I said, no, I need white Americans talking to white Americans. And when we've been talking about what your criticism of Trump and others, are you seeing that? Are you seeing the folk who you used to be aligned with now maybe mad at you? Are those conversations happening, white on white conversations about this changing of America and how this hardcore merging of political ideology with conservative Christian ideology, how that is not good for the country? Is that happening? Should it happen? Your thoughts on that?
Is it happening? Yes and no. It depends on who you're talking to. I know that in a lot of circles, the conversation is very much alive and well, and there's no angst about it. The demographics of our country have shifted and will continue to shift. That's why it's so important that we understand that America is about the rule of law. America is not about a race. It's not about a religion. It's not about a political ideology. And my consternation is with both sides of the political spectrum. Let's be honest, Roland. There's a lot of people that are criticizing Trump that said nothing when Joe Biden was helping Benjamin Netanyahu to murder hundreds of thousands of innocent women and children. They were all for it. Then whenever Trump comes along and he continues the Biden policy of supporting the genocide in Gaza, now they're morally outraged. So there's a lot of hypocritical standards on both sides of the aisle. Let's be honest. But that's the thing that I try to fight, is to try to get over the fact that America is a nation of law, not political ideology, not race, not political opinion or personal opinion or even religious opinion. The freedom of religion is for all of us. The freedom of speech is for all of us. The freedom to assemble, to redress and protest government is for all of us. We must all respect each other as Americans and as human beings created in the image of God. We should not focus at all on the political ideology, the religious ideology, the makeup of racially. That really should not matter to any of us.
But it's interesting you're saying that.
But
it's interesting you're saying that, because as we're talking, literally this just popped up. The Pentagon is hosting a Good Friday service just for Protestants and not Catholics. A statement went out. It said, just a friendly reminder, there will be a Protestant service, parentheses, no Catholic mass, for Good Friday today at the Pentagon Chapel. That was according to a Friday email that was sent by the Air Force leadership. And what is, again, I sit here and I go, and again, I was born and raised Catholic. I'm no longer Catholic. I left when I was 25. I'm still a Christian. But when you see what Peter Hegseth is doing at the Pentagon, when you see, again, Republicans love the Catholic Church because of its opposition to abortion, but they hate the Catholic Church about their position on the death penalty, as well as the Pope's position on what's happening with Israel in Gaza and Palestinians, I sit here and go, what are we talking about? Like, it's crazy.
Peter Hegseth is not only a war criminal, and I mean that literally, not figuratively. He is, under the definition of war crime, he is a war criminal. But not only that, he's a heretic. He has taken Christianity and turned it into a doctrine of hate and a doctrine of war and a doctrine of division. He is a white nationalist, and his vision of faith is completely counter to everything Jesus taught and everything that the New Testament teaches. As I said earlier in our interview here, we are in the body of Christ, which means that we are one in Christ. So war is the antithesis of the body of Christ. How can one part of the body in one country hate and commit unlawful war against another part of the same body? There are tens of thousands of Christians in Iran, and they worship freely. And that's what a lot of people don't. The propaganda about Iran and the propaganda about the Palestinian people is so massive that everybody in the United States almost buys into this idea about who the Iranian people are, that they're these monsters, subhuman, the Amalekites of 2026, without a soul, that they're like animals that we can just slaughter. That's the view of Benjamin Netanyahu and Ben Gvir and these other ultra-Zionists in Israel. And unfortunately, there's a lot of professing Christians that share that view. The Iranian people are not at all what they are described as being. And the fact that there are many thousands of Christians that worship in Iran without persecution is a testament to the diversity of the nation and the accommodation of people of differing faiths within the nation of Iran. So when we go bomb Iran, we are killing fellow Christians. A large percentage of the Palestinian people, and I haven't been to Iran personally, but I have been to the Middle East. I have been to Egypt and Syria. I've been to Jordan. I've been to all around Israel and West Bank, Gaza. I've been there. I've met Palestinian people. I've talked to them in their homes. I've dined with them. I've spoken in small groups. I've spoken in their churches. I find the Palestinian Christian people to be among the most compassionate, loving, Christ-filled people I have ever met in my entire life. We have a lot of people that follow us on our online ministry in Palestine. And to think that many of these people that I knew and loved and broke bread with and prayed with and worshiped with have been slaughtered by my government and supported by Christian brothers and sisters who do it in the name of God. It breaks my heart. Because I know these people. And Hegseth is the quintessential hate monger. If the SPLC is looking for somebody that represents hate, then Pete Hegseth is their guy. Because this is a man that has taken Christianity, taken it back to the old covenant, improperly applied the old covenant laws to his version of hate, division, and war. And those are the three words that really define Pete Hegseth's ideology: hate, war, and division. And that's all of those three are the total polar opposite of Christianity.
Last question for you. When I look at, I recently had Jim Wallace on the show. I'm sitting here, I did a book interview. I'm sitting here looking at Dr. King's book, Strength to Love, of course, on this day in 1968. He gave his last sermon in Mason Temple. I'm looking at Reggie Williams' book on Dietrich Bonhoeffer called Bonhoeffer's Black Jesus.
Yeah.
I think about Bishop William Barber and others. And then I think about Franklin Graham, who was always hesitant when I was asked, is Obama a Christian? But oh my God, he went to CPAC and said, we need a third term for Donald Trump.
Right.
And as somebody who was in the moral majority movement, as somebody who is now critical of many aspects of white conservative Christianity, what's next? What happens next? I rarely see these forces, these divergent forces, sitting there and having a public conversation. Ralph Reed has his Faith and Freedom Conference, and I joke every year, I go look at the agenda, and I never see the poor on that agenda. And I would love to see Jim Wallace and Bishop William Barber sitting across from Ralph Reed and Franklin Graham, and say, no, let's have a real public conversation about Christianity, faith, politics, and the future of America in this world. Just your thoughts on, is that needed, that public conversation back and forth, as opposed to folk operating and sitting in different ideological, faith-based corners?
Of course it's needed. That has been the history of our Republican small r form of government is dialogue, debate, discourse. That's one of the scary things about the last 20, 25 years, is that the discourse and the debate and the discussion has in many ways disappeared, at least and especially in the religious realm. Now, thank God for, back in the day, talk shows was, the vogue element of communication. And I was a part of that. I came in 2 years after Rush Limbaugh started his program. I started mine. So I kind of was in on the ground floor of that. And now that's been replaced more or less with what you're doing in the podcast movement, which is, I think, tremendous, because it has reopened the dialogue that should have been taking place all along, but had waned since Bush became president. So absolutely. I mean, and that's the problem that we face on a geopolitical level as well, because our country has refused to really have dialogue with other countries. We don't want to hear what other countries have to say. We want to bully them into doing what we want them to do. And if they don't submit to our hegemony, then we threaten them with violence. And Iran is just the latest example of that, but it's certainly not the first. And that's the way we've been conducting foreign policy for a long time. So we're not even talking to people in other countries. Diplomacy at the national level is almost non-existent. And I think that is a reflection and a byproduct of the lack of diplomacy that's taking place inside the United States. We are talking at each other. We're not talking with each other. And so to your point, I mean, I don't know how anyone could even question what you're suggesting. But when you talk about the Franklin Grahams of the world, though, and believe me, I don't know Franklin Graham personally. Okay, he's one of the one. I was around when his dad was still around, so I didn't really get to know Franklin Graham. But I can tell you, these guys that we all know by name, for the most part, they're not having these discussions, and they're not interested in having these discussions. They have a personal agenda, and they have a financial agenda. And again, I go back to that because this is the thing that just I saw up close. Let me give you one example. So we're sitting in Washington, D.C. at a press conference, and I was involved in many of those. The leaders of the moral majority, Falwell and several others, were the panelists, and the rest of us were spectators in the audience. And I was just a young guy. So I remember one of the questions that was asked of, and if I name him, everybody would know his name. And so I said, this question is for so-and-so. And here's the question. He said, okay, so I've heard a lot of discussion about, what you're saying, but can you tell me succinctly in just one statement what it is that you really want? I mean, the moral majority was very new back then, and it grew very exponentially to a place of prominence almost overnight. And so it was kind of an unknown commodity at that level. And so I thought it was a good question, actually. I thought to myself, as I heard, I said, wow, that's a great question. Give us an opportunity to tell the public what really we are all about. Show our heart. Let's just talk from our heart and say, we love America. We want what's good for America. We believe in the basic values of decency and humanity and all this. That's what I was thinking in my mind. So the man that answered the question, I'll never forget his answer. It's still in my mind, and it blew me away. And what he said was this: all we want is a seat at the table. What? All that we're going through, all this labor and energy and tears and sweat and work is so that some of you guys can have a seat at the king's table. But that's, in the minds of many of them, that's exactly what it was. It wasn't about what was good for the country. It was they wanted a seat at the power table. And when you're sitting at the king's table, Roland, believe me, I saw it, there are perks beyond belief. And I fear that what we have among those people that were in that Oval Office you're talking about was exactly that. They got their seat at the table. And with that seat at the table comes manifold material reward. So if that is what's driving you, you're not interested in honest dialogue. You're not interested in hearing another point of view because your agenda is enriching yourself, and that is your priority. I hate to say that. I don't get joy out of saying this because some of these people are people that I've known, sat with, next to, dined with, spoken with, been with. I'm just being honest about it. And so yes, there is dialogue, I believe, going on and increasing. But there is an element among the white event, and there might be in the black. You can speak more to the black audience than I can. But I think in these different groups of Americans, there are some, like you and I, who want to be honest, and we want the dialogue, and we want to share the things that we have in common that make our country a better country. And there are other people that have ulterior motives in mind that are in it for whatever they're getting out of it. And no, they're not interested in dialogue. So I think the answer to the question is yes and no.
Well, and that's why, to your point, I've long said that when you are a religious leader, a faith leader, your job is to have a prophetic voice and not one a prophet, to be a prophet. So there's P-R-O-F-I-T and there's P-R-O-P-H-E-T.
Yes,
and real prophetic leaders may say, President Barack Obama, I like you and support you, but here's the truth. You may have someone who says that Donald Trump, I like you and support you, but here's the truth. And I use the biblical model. Again, when the people, because I did a whole video when I said, okay, America, y'all said y'all wanted a king. Okay, y'all got your king. And I said the people of Israel, they said, oh, we want a king. And the prophet going, what are you talking about? God is your leader. And God said, okay, I'm going to let y'all have a king. But I'm going to tell you what the king is going to do to you.
That's exactly right.
And we saw what happened when they got their wish. No, we want a king like everybody else. God said, okay, this is what the king is going to do to you. And I remind people, in the Bible, prophets spoke to David, to Saul, and others and said, here's the truth. They weren't friends. They may have loved them, but they said, God told me to speak truth to you. The problem that I see with many of these white conservative evangelicals is they don't want to speak truth. To your point, they want to be sitting at the table of power. They're not there with a prophetic voice. Right. And that, to me, is what's troubling as we move forward in this country. And so they have to be challenged. They have to be pushed. And again, they can support Donald Trump, but they're going to have to defend the policies according to their faith. And too many of them are actually not doing that. So, Pastor Chuck Baldwin, I appreciate this conversation. I hope folk get something out of it. And I really do. I hope that among many conservative white evangelicals, they begin to ask some serious questions. And that is, like the preacher, I think out of North Carolina, I ran a video when he said, don't you dare buy a Bible that has the U.S. Constitution in it. He said those two documents don't go together. And he went real hard. And he said, listen, the Constitution is separate from the Bible. And some people were upset with him, but he said he was there to give a prophetic voice in terms of where we are in this country. And I just think a lot of people need to be challenged on these very issues.
I couldn't agree more, and that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm the white guy, and so I'm not very popular among a lot of other white evangelicals. But I made a decision years ago that wasn't my motivation, and I wasn't going to be swayed by that. So I do my best, Roland. I'm sure I fail. I mean, we're all weak, and we're all sinful, and we all fall short. But in my heart of hearts, I'm dedicated to truth, and I'm dedicated to being a spokesman for truth as I understand it. And I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm not going to be bribed. I'm not going to be bullied. I've lived. I thank God for what I lived through, because it gave me an insight and a perspective that I needed, that now I can draw from and clarify truth to the people of our country, especially the white evangelical community. And so, I thank God, where he brought me to. And for as much time as I have left, I'm going to just speak the truth, regardless of who likes it and who doesn't, and be very happy in doing it.
All right. Well, I appreciate that, and I'm gonna make sure my producers get your address. I'm gonna send you a copy of my book for you to check out. My book right here. So
Thank you.
I
I'd love to
appreciate
read
it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
All right, folks, we want y'all to check out a special that we have airing on the Black Star Network on April 4th, tomorrow. And that is, it's called April 4th, 1968. We've done a lot of interviews with people who work with Dr. King, others, of course, who were following his work. And we talked to them about what they remember on that fateful day in Memphis when he was assassinated on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. It is an unbelievable, fascinating special, and you want to watch April 4th, 1968, only right here on the Black Star Network.
I just remember my dad's voice.
I may not get there with you.
If Dad had not been killed, well, probably we wouldn't be dealing with the things we're dealing with, first of all. It was the way, the trauma, the traumatic way that he was killed that I think makes his message, his movement, even more lasting.
I think something died in America with the death of Dr. King. Martin King always talked about the fact that he would be shot down in the streets of the nation in the midst of this campaign.
Everybody's kind of focusing on Martin's assassination. I've been trying to figure out a way to help them to realize that he didn't go nowhere. His body was buried, but his spirit is more alive now in more ways than any of us could ever imagine.
All right, y'all, don't forget, support the work that we do. Y'all, this is what this is about. We ain't got time for all this other little silly stuff out here that people are doing. What we do here, we focus on the work. We focus on the work. So if you want to contribute to our, of course, our Bring the Funk fan club, please do so. Cash App. Use the Stripe QR code. You see it right here. Use that for credit cards as well. Checks and money order. Make them P.O. Box. Make it payable to Roland Martin Unfiltered. P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. PayPal's R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo's RM Unfiltered. Zelle, Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Download the Black Star Network app. Apple phone, Android phone, Apple TV, Android TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, Samsung Smart TV. You want to get our Roland Martin Unfiltered swag? Please do so by going to shopblackstarnetwork.com. Man, we got T-shirts and hoodies and zip-ups, and we got wall art, mugs, all kind of stuff at shopblackstarnetwork.com. And of course, we support black-owned companies. And when you go to shopblackstarnetwork.com, you're going to see all of these black-owned companies right here. All of these products you see right here are black-owned companies that are on our shopblackstarnetwork.com. And you can get hats and T-shirts and dolls and skincare stuff. You can get spices, seasonings, sauces. I mean, you name it. We got dog treats, backpacks, candles, all that sort of stuff. So please support these black-owned companies. We talk about the collective. We talk about how we have to buy black, support our own. We've got some amazing companies with amazing quality products, and so we must be supporting our own. We must spend with our own, and so please do so by going to shopblackstarnetwork.com. And when you buy these products, you're also helping this show because part of the proceeds come back to us. And so this is how we're able to help one another. So go to shopblackstarnetwork.com, our marketplace, to check out all of these products right here in our marketplace at shopblackstarnetwork.com. I'll see you guys right here Monday. Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. Holla!